Okay, good morning. I'll just put that down a bit so I can see over it. Thank you. Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm joined by COVID-19 Response Commander Jeroen Weimar, who will run through today's outbreak in some more detail. But first, if I could provide an update with the numbers of the day. So yesterday there were 1,903 new cases of coronavirus, all locally acquired. We now have 22,327 active cases. Sadly, 7 people have lost their lives with COVID-19. A man in his 50s from Brimbank, a woman in her 60s from Whittlesea, a man in his 70s from Bawbaw, a woman in her 70s from Moreland, a woman in her 80s and a woman in her 90s from Casey, and a man in his 90s from Whittlesea. This will be an incredibly difficult time for their family and their friends, and we pass on our deepest sympathies to their loved ones at this very challenging time. There are 851 people currently in hospital with COVID-19, 155 are in ICU, 103 are on a ventilator. 69,825 tests were processed yesterday. Again, another very, very significant day and very significant effort by so many people across our community. And 32,405 vaccines were administered in our state hubs. That brings us up to 89.2% of the over 16 population in Victoria, which now has had a first dose of a COVID-19 vaccine, and 66.5% have had a second dose. A special shout out to my local area in Ballarat, which is now at 91.8% for a first dose and 68% for a second dose. Now, yesterday, the Premier made some very significant announcements that reflect where we're at now with our roadmap to reopening and some of the benefits that flow to the community from even greater than expected some months ago rates of vaccination. And so to each and every person in the community who has made their appointment and turned up for their vaccination, you did this, and it is a remarkable achievement. So as our state prepares to reopen, we're announcing some new support today to bolster businesses and to breathe new life into local neighbourhoods. This is practical support for an expanded and vibrant outdoor economy right across Victoria. And as you all know, the national roadmap and that national plan upon which the Victorian plan is shaped overwhelmingly opens to indoor activity at 80% and outdoor activity to 70%. There's some additional measures that we were able to introduce yesterday, but we all know that it is safer outdoors for groups of people to gather. And so what we want to do for and with our business community and other community organisations is to make it easier and more enjoyable for people to do those things outdoors. So I'm delighted today to announce the Outdoor Economy Package, which will provide $54.5 million to support businesses and other organisations to be doing all of those things that we all want to be doing outdoors and safely. So it's an investment in the future of these businesses as they prepare to recover and rebuild, but also for local councils to provide that important infrastructure and support to make it happen. The package will support a broad range of businesses, broader than was the support last year, which was focused predominantly on hospitality. So retailers, hair and beauty, dance studios and gyms, among others, that will be able to explore new options to take some, if not all, of their trade outdoors. This is in addition to the bars, cafes and restaurants that were part of last year's successful outdoor eating and entertainment program. So the package does two things. It provides support for right now, but it also provides support for the future. So it breaks down into a couple of parts. So $14.5 million of this funding is for an outdoor activation voucher program. It'll support 7,000 businesses, community organisations, not-for-profits and trader organisations with $2,000 grants when they commit to spending at least $2,000 towards outdoor initiatives. So things like marquees, heating, screens, umbrellas, insurance, training staff, and promoting these new options for trade, these new outdoor operations. 1 in 5 of these vouchers will go to organisations in regional Victoria. The other part is a $40 million COVID-safe outdoor activation fund, which will help councils to support local businesses. So $20.5 million to councils for immediate works and services to allow businesses to operate outdoors. Things like furniture, landscaping, planter boxes, public art, indeed even entertainment to bring our outdoor precincts back to life. And councils will also receive a share of $19.5 million to establish semi-permanent and permanent outdoor precincts. We've designed this in a way that these funds will be able to get to councils very, very quickly, and they will need to provide us with a plan and account for what it is that they're doing with the funding. But this is about making this support available within days to help our small businesses to recover and get back on their feet. I want to stress that councils that accept the outdoor economy grants will be required to not create or impose any new or net additional fees or charges to businesses to use new or upgraded outdoor spaces. There's a task for all of us, councils included, to be supporting businesses that have borne a heavy burden, a really significant burden. And I take a moment to thank and to recognise the significant sacrifice that people in our small business community have made. It is because of the sacrifices that they have made that tens of thousands of lives have been able to be saved. Countless illnesses have been able to be avoided, and we are now in a position to reopen safely based on the best possible health advice. We're also encouraging councils to use these grants, should they wish, to waive some of those permit fees and other charges that might be an impediment to getting back to trade. The package will support all councils, and it will do so in a graded way depending on the scale of their outdoor economy activity, with the exception of the City of Melbourne, with whom we have significant other programs and support in place. So now that brings Victorian Government support for our business community in excess of $11 billion in direct economic support over 20 months. More than $5.8 billion to 180,000 businesses since June alone, and payments are continuing through the rollout of the most recently announced packages. So it's an exciting time. It's a challenging transition, of course, but we have had such a significant moment yesterday. I'm sure phones were ringing off the hook in cafes and pubs and restaurants and hair and beauty salons all over the state and any number of other places as people are arranging to see their loved ones and to get back to doing some of those things that we've so desperately missed. So thank you, and I'll now get Jeroen to speak a bit more to the cases. Thanks.
Thank you, Minister, and good morning. 1,903 cases yesterday here in Victoria. That takes us to a total of 22,327 active cases of coronavirus across the state. As a result, we also have 61,341 primary close contacts, and my thanks to all those 61,000 people for doing the right thing and doing their isolation and their quarantine period to ensure we minimise wherever possible the ongoing spread of COVID across our community. The geographic spread is very similar to what we've seen over recent weeks. Again, that accelerating trend of cases, particularly within our south-eastern suburbs. In the south-east today, we have 592 cases. That's almost a third of our total cases today. And again, with Casey being the highest LGA today with 188 new cases of coronavirus. Our western suburbs have 519 new cases today. It's just over a quarter. And again, we're seeing a continued slight drop in the proportion of cases in the west. And similarly in the north with 497 cases today. again, around just over a quarter of all the cases today, and again, a slight reduction on where they've been in recent weeks. We have 106 cases in the eastern suburbs. We have 166 cases across regional Victoria, and around 23 cases which are either interstate or we are working through. In terms of regional Victorian cases, we have a total now of 1,635 cases across regional Victoria. It's around just under 9% of all of our new cases, and that proportion of new cases in regional Victoria is slowly increasing day on day on day, as we're seeing more of those little spot fires across different parts of our regional communities. We have 38 cases in Geelong, Greater Geelong. Most of those are well understood and connected to known cases or exposure sites. In the Latrobe Valley, we have 29 cases. Some work being done to understand those exact linkages, but again, it's an ongoing growth of the outbreak down there. And in Baw Baw Shire next door, we have 19 cases. Those numbers are starting to stabilise. Again, household primary close contacts, known associates of the positive cases. In Shepparton, we have 12 cases, particularly involving a couple of schools, as it's a younger cohort of positive cases or cluster of cases in Shepparton. And I'm pleased to confirm that in Mildura we have 9 cases today, and although that's 9 more than we'd like, it is a slowdown of the recent cases we've seen in Mildura. And again, outstanding work being done by local agencies up in Mildura. My thanks to them for their hard work of the last week. Mildura, of course, continues in lockdown at this point in time, and will review their position on a day-to-day basis over the course of this week. We've also seen outbreaks in places like Ballarat, Ararat, Colac and Warrnambool, and a shout out to them because I think they've been really well managed in the community. We've seen, although we've seen cases in a number of workplaces, a number of different household type settings, really swift contact tracing and support by local agencies has managed to contain those very quickly. We don't see any significant onward spread at this point in time. Of course, vaccination, we're now hurtling towards our 70% and 80% double dose targets, and the pace, if anything, is starting to increase. And following yesterday's announcements, we saw a rocketing of double dose bookings, over 31,000 bookings yesterday for people's vaccination slots. And can I please encourage you, if you haven't yet booked in your second dose appointment, please join the thousands that are getting their second doses done today and tomorrow and over this course of this week. The quicker we get those second doses in, the quicker you complete your vaccination journey and have that extra protection, and the quicker the state gets to those 70% and 80% thresholds, now that we can start to see what lies beyond some of those dates. In terms of age groups now, every single age group over the age of 16 is now on more than 80% first dose coverage, and we're seeing the older age groups now well into the mid-90s, 95% of over 70s, just phenomenal levels and continuing to grow every single day. Again, we're seeing a phenomenal performance by younger Victorians. Those 12 to 15-year-olds have only been able to get vaccinated over the last 5 weeks. And in the space of the last 5 weeks, 225,000 young people have got themselves vaccinated. That's almost 3/4 now of 12 to 15-year-olds having had their first dose. That enthusiasm and desire to get vaccinated by younger Victorians is really good to see, and we're very grateful to them for coming forward in such good numbers, many of which I saw at Casey only on Saturday. And also encouragingly, in terms of our second dose performance, all age groups over the age of 40 are now well over 75% second dose. So again, we're just waiting now for the more recent people to catch up on their second dose appointments before we get to that 70 and 80% threshold. We're also seeing good geographic coverage of vaccination levels. There are now only 3 local government areas across Victoria where the first dose rate is below 80%, and that's in the city of Yarra, city of Stonington, and the city of Port Phillip. And there are only a further 3 where the first dose vaccination rate is below 85%, and that's in Maribyrnong, Darebin and Moreland. And when you then break it down to postcode level and sub-postcode level, there are in fact around 25,000 individuals that we're really keen to get vaccinated in a number of very tightly defined geographic areas that straddle over those 6 LGA areas. That's why we've launched our neighbourhood vaccination programme, the mini pops that are coming up everywhere, the school vaccination programmes that are all targeted at those remaining small pockets of relative under-vaccination. We're really keen to get to ensure that those communities do avail themselves of the protection of the vaccine, particularly as we start to step towards those easings at 70 and 80%. There are, for people to get their vaccinations done, as well as the various walk-up facilities that are now available, there are also 40,000 second dose vaccination slots available. in the next 7 days. They're available right now, and we'd be delighted if people came forward and got themselves done. And there are also still 25,000 first dose vaccination slots available as well over the next 7 days. Again, we'd really like to see bookings being made. And if you've got a booking, but it's a bit further out and you can bring it forward because the timelines allow you to do so, then please do that as well. Another shout out for our colleagues in community pharmacy. We've now seen over 140,000 Victorians take up the Moderna vaccine, largely through the community pharmacy and through some of our state clinics. So that first dose rate of Moderna has proven to be really effective, and it's a safe and effective mRNA vaccine that people can access. We're now starting our second dose cycles on Moderna. First doses are still available, of course, but we're now also starting our second doses, and there will be thousands of second doses due in the coming weeks. We continue to run our walk-in program at a number of our state vaccination clinics, including at Sandown Racecourse, at the Palm Plaza in Dandenong, at the Bayside Vaccination Centre in Frankston, at our Melton Vaccination Centre, at Jeff Shed, Sunshine Hospital, or Shepperton Showgrounds, or Traralgon Racecourse, or of course any of the 700 community pharmacies around the state who will also do your first or second dose Moderna vaccination for you. Finally, with now 2/3 of adult Victorians being fully vaccinated, and because of the far lower risk of both contracting COVID and passing on COVID, we've now we'll be making a further change to the isolation protocols for primary close contacts from this Thursday, so from our 70% double dose vaccination date. What that means is if you are fully vaccinated, you'll only be required to do a 7-day quarantine if you're a primary close contact. So if you're a workplace primary close contact or a social primary close contact of a positive case, but you are fully vaccinated, you'll only need to do a 7-day quarantine rather than a 14-day quarantine from Thursday onwards. If you're currently a primary close contact of somebody, either a workplace or a social primary close contact, and you are fully vaccinated, if you are at day 6 or beyond on Thursday, then you'll be able to go and get your final test, your closeout test, and if that test is negative, you'll be released from your quarantine period. The only exception to that, of course, is people who are living in a household with a positive case. If you're living with a positive case, then the whole household will do a 14-day quarantine period at this point. We're not changing that for the foreseeable future, but I'm delighted to minimise the impact, not only on the individuals, of course, with over 60,000 primary close contacts caught up in these positive cases, significant numbers of those, if they're fully vaccinated and they're not living in the same household as a positive case, they'll be able to move to a 7-day quarantine period. That'll also really, I think, significantly help businesses as they start to resume operations as we see a reduced impact of workplace exposure. With that, I'll hand back to Minister Pulford for any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeroen. Any questions?
Minister, for any businesses who are unable to open once we hit that 70% threshold, will they still receive any business help?
So the business support grants will continue for those that are significantly restricted, and those to whom that applies will be aware of that. There are, of course, many businesses that have been able to trade throughout, albeit very differently, and we're very cognisant that the restrictions at 70% and at 80% do mean different things to different businesses, and this can be, of course, something that has nothing whatsoever to do with the nature of the industry. It could be just the physical setup of the premises that's quite different to the physical setup of another premises doing very, very similar type of work. So we'll continue working with our business community throughout this period of transition and make sure that the support that they need and the advice that they also need about opening safely and what arrangements apply to them for their sector are nice and clear for them.
Minister, are you able to talk us through, I guess, what this curbside trading is going to look like, particularly for businesses like hairdressers and beauty services?
Yeah. So I imagine there's probably some hair and beauty services that people wouldn't mind having done in a marquee, and others that they'd probably prefer to do somewhere private. So this will be a matter for individual businesses about how much they want to embrace this. Of course, with every shot in every arm, we get closer to 80%, and I think now we can all have some hope that we're all going to charge past 80% even further, and many communities now nudging 90% or greater for their first vaccination. So it is. They are arrangements that enable businesses to trade safely for us to continue to manage demand on the health service, but give people some options for the next handful of weeks or perhaps through the summer. And so a matter for individual businesses to decide what works with them, and perhaps it might be a conversation with landlord about setting something up out in the car park. But these grants will be available to a broader range of businesses than they were previously, and this is about giving people more options.
So would it mean, say for a hairdresser that can have 5 people inside, if they can then set up a marquee out the front, can they have another 5 people, another 10 people? What will be the limit on their capacity outdoors?
So there are general outdoor limits and general indoor limits that apply. So rather than perhaps taking one particular example, if businesses look at the roadmap and see the indoor and outdoor limits that apply really consistently throughout, whether they're in metropolitan Melbourne or regional Victoria, whether they're at 70% double dosed from this Friday onwards, or 80%, just another 10 days or so thereafter, they'll be able to ascertain what their new limit will be.
So it would be on a density requirement outside. So if you had a marquee, you'd have to work it out as like 1 per 2 square metres.
Yeah, that's right. So again, there are some general principles that flow very consistently through all of the documents that were updated and released yesterday. And so in general terms, and there's the odd exception here and there, but in general terms, it's 1 per 4 metre indoor and 1 per 2 outdoor. And so you see that for restaurants and cafes, the same logic would apply for hair and beauty, or for other personal services, and again, a matter for businesses to decide whether that's going to work for them. Of course, a salon, say a medium-sized salon might have 5 or 6 hairdressers, or say up to 10 at capacity. They might be able to run 10 chairs. So the 5 patron rule at the moment means that for a business like that, they would be somewhat limited, but it's not like they could have 50 patrons anyway, because they only have so many hairdressers.
Have you read the Riot Act to councils? Because we have seen in the past quite significant inconsistencies between councils as to what they will allow happen, how much they are going to charge businesses, that sort of thing. Have you read the Riot Act to them to make this work?
Just to the one, actually. Overwhelmingly, councils are very supportive. Governments around the world have had to do some very significant things to support communities, to support health systems, and to support businesses through this extraordinary 20 months we've all been living through. Look, last year there was one council that was perhaps a little less enthusiastic about supporting their local traders than the rest, and this year we've had the same. But these are thankfully really isolated incidents, and I think, if I reflect on, councils through regional Victoria that have been, up and going with outdoor trade for a good few weeks now, there's a lot of effort being made to, make footpaths available, relocate some parking temporarily, those kinds of things. And so the grants today, there's really 2 streams. One is about what can be stood up super quickly, pop some bollards up and put some tables out. And then the other is about creating new semi-permanent or possibly even permanent precincts that will become places where people can undertake outdoor trade.
Just on the permanence, Minister, there's a whole heap of research about how, and real-life experience about how the transmission rate can be kept down long-term if we move a lot of society outdoors. Yeah. There's a lot of talk kind of in the media and among industry groups about these being temporary measures until we get to 80%. Do you think there's enough of an awareness among businesses and industry groups about how important it could be to keep out of lockdown for us long-term if we move society outdoors for the next year or so?
Look, I spend time, every day of every week talking to people in small businesses and people in our business community, and they're united by just a great passion for what they do, and they just want to be trading, and they want to be trading in the best way that they can and doing so safely. They have a deep commitment to the safety of their staff. They have a deep commitment to the safety of their patrons. And so, you know, I think, and based on my conversations and their reflections that they share with me, there's a lot of thinking going on about what outdoors is going to be like and how we can be more outdoors than perhaps we've been before. And I think, you know, you look at the experiences from the Northern Hemisphere that are some months ahead of us in many respects, with adaptation to living with COVID in lockdown, and now for very soon for us in Melbourne out of lockdown. And you know, I think consumers are increasingly having a preference for sitting outside if they can, or being outside if they can. So I think it will be a combination of the two, you know, that a table outside, might have a certain amount of demand, and a table inside might have a certain amount of demand, and our businesses will respond to that, I'm sure.
Is there, or has there already been guidance given to, say, restaurants and pubs about how to maximise or make ventilation as kind of top quality as they can in their venues? Is there guidance on opening windows in restaurants, guidance about keeping the door open? Is there messaging going out to all of these groups yet?
Certainly some of the peak business organisations are providing that advice to their members. In terms of advice from the Health Department, I might ask Jeroen to provide you with some further advice. Obviously the government's been undertaking a very big project in terms of preparing kids for return to school, which is very, very exciting for them and their parents alike. But in terms of specific advice to business and what more we are and can doing about that, Jeroen might be able to add to that. But certainly business organisations are familiarising themselves with that information, keeping windows and doors open and the like as well.
With these outdoor measures, are you looking at this as an opportunity to bridge some gaps around density and capacity between 70 and 80, or are you seeing things like curbside haircuts or dance lessons out on the footpath being something beyond 80% as well?
Look, I think it'll be a bit of both, and again, like, businesses will decide what works for them, and there'll be little places that can only have certain numbers of people, even at the best of times with a low density quotient, that can suddenly double their footprint by moving out onto the footpath or out into the car park at the back. You certainly see, when we all go on our daily walks, you can see the personal trainers putting people through their paces out in the streets. I wouldn't be surprised if the fitness industry, has quite an ongoing outdoor activity take-up. But, these are the things that we talk to business organisations about, and it's one of the reasons that in shaping these grants, it's not exclusively limited to hospitality, because we think there are others that might want to avail themselves of these opportunities.
With the vaccine passports, who do you expect to be policing that for these businesses, especially in the outdoor settings? This is a shared responsibility. I'd have thought that overwhelmingly people who have been vaccinated would be very comfortable with demonstrating, the price of entry to the pub or the price of entry for a haircut is, here's my vaccine certificate, and there's a number of different ways that people can provide that information. On their phone, integrated with the Service Victoria app, you can print out a certificate or go into a Commonwealth Government office and have that printed out for you. So a range of options for people depending on how tech they are. So there's a responsibility for the patron to be able to demonstrate that they're eligible to enter the venue. Venues know their rights, I think, and we've been doing a lot of work with them to make sure that they're comfortable about knowing their rights and comfortable about expressing them. I mean, people come into their venues on their terms, so I think this will be, as the Premier said yesterday and on a number of other occasions, we're in a period of transition. The trials, I gather, are going really well, and that's important ahead of next Friday, when the numbers of people out and about will be far greater. I think I think after everything we've all been through, after everything particularly people in Melbourne have been through to keep the community safe, this is it's a pretty small price to pay to be able to get back to doing those things that have been so missed.
On that front, there's been a fair bit of confusion in small business. If we use, again, a hairdresser as an example, they're not an authorised worker. They haven't been able to go to work during our lockdown period. But now that they're coming back, they're only able to serve and do treatments on double-vaxxed customers. There was a discrepancy or a misunderstanding, I suppose, in some businesses that their staff have to also be fully vaxxed come this Friday when they're able to reopen. It's 5 days sooner than they thought, which is overwhelmingly a good thing, but it is going to catch some short. So can you just clarify what is expected of staff members in places like pubs and cafes that aren't authorised workers?
Yes, so what happened yesterday was all the things that were going to happen on the 26th, on or around the 26th of October, have all jumped forward 5 days, which is of course a fabulous thing. And it's possible that there'll be a small number of people who aren't quite ready for that, and that's why we have a few days to go between yesterday and of course when things roar into action on Friday. There were a couple of queries through the afternoon yesterday that we've now clarified, and for a business in that situation, what was going to be the case for the 26th of October is the case for the 21st of October, which means patrons need to be vaccinated and staff need to be vaccinated.
Minister, how quickly do you think the Melbourne CBD will bounce back from the lockdown come Friday?
Look, the Melbourne CBD, has endured a really tough time. So many people working from home, more impacted than any other part of Victoria. I think based on our experience when we had that good long break earlier in the year between significant outbreaks, I think people will be busting to get back into the Melbourne CBD. I know the council, the Lord Mayor, they'll be throwing the doors open in every which way they can, and Melbourne CBD traders that have had their businesses in a state of hibernation will be so pleased to welcome people back in. I guess my message to people as they're thinking about how they're going to enjoy the newfound and very hard-won freedoms from Friday, and again when we get to 80%, we really need to continue the momentum with vaccination. Think about the small businesses and think about those people who've had such a tough time, really, really tough time. And so if you're going for dinner with a friend, pick up a cake, pick up a bunch of flowers for your mum. There's a lot we can all do in our everyday gestures and our everyday expenditure to help our small businesses to recover and to recover quickly. When you're catching up with your friends, think about where you can go, and maybe that might mean jumping online and having a look at what bookings are available in the CBD, perhaps rather than a place in your own neighbourhood that has actually been quite busy throughout.
Final questions. Sorry, on the schools front, similar to what we're talking about, where 5 days earlier it's good for most, but it is tripping up some. Some schools are saying they're going to have to adjust, they have to have staff, and schools physically able to open now days earlier, given that some kids can go back Friday when it wasn't expected. Does the government apologise for that in any way, shape or form, and should we have given them more of a heads up?
When we announced the roadmap in September, we made it really clear that the modelling said the dates would be the 26th of October and the 5th of November, unless we could beat them. And I think we've all made, the entire Victorian community's made an amazing virtue out of trying to beat them and beat them comprehensively. And that's happened. And so I think people won't be terribly shocked about these changes because they've been coming. We've been getting ever closer every day. And so, similarly, the roadmap does still indicate the 5th of November or sooner. But I think everyone in the state is now, really going very, very hard for those first days of November so that we can have that next lot of freedoms.
It's just on the outdoor gatherings, Minister, it's, I think it's 15 people can get together, but only 5 people can train with a personal trainer. Is that a bit of an oversight there, do you think?
Look, I might ask Jeroen perhaps to assist with that. The gatherings, the
private gatherings in homes, the personal gatherings, the private gatherings in homes, and then the public gatherings of groups of people at 15 in Melbourne, I think at 20 in regional Victoria, that they've been determined based on the public health advice that is derived from the modelling and the vaccination rollout rate. For everyone for whom things are happening a bit too fast, there are of course every number as many people for whom things can't return fast enough. There is 10 days, we think, between the 70% rate and the 80% rate, and this is around a science-based, evidence-informed reopening that will mean that we're reopening and staying open, and that we are keeping the community safe, that we are managing the pressure on our health system, which I think we all understand is very significant for people working on the front line there, but doing so in a measured way. And so there are limits, and wherever a line is drawn, there'll be someone just one side of it or the other. Our message to people is keep powering through with the vaccination take-up. If you have someone that's just lacking that little bit of confidence to go and get their vaccination, have a gentle talk to them, encourage them to talk to a health professional about their reasons. Every single shot makes a difference, and we just get closer and closer every day.
Can we go to drone?
Yeah, drone.
Port Donington, Yarra are somewhat surprising. You said you had kind of smaller postcode breakdowns. Are they younger cohorts, people around public housing towers? What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, look, there's a number of sort of inner north, inner south suburbs that, in a few streets really, where we're seeing a lower take up of vaccinations, and we're ranges for that. Some of it's not so much age based, but it's more around I think individual groups that have not really wanted to come forward and get vaccinated yet. And look, and as we start to see the rest of the city now go, well beyond 85 into the high 80%, and Victoria as a whole going towards 90%, those remaining little islands of lack of vaccine uptake are now becoming identified and really becoming very clear. So that's why we've been driving at those locations with school pop-ups and with other community-based pop-ups. We'll keep doing that because we want everybody to have really no excuse not to get vaccinated over the days and weeks ahead.
Are there any identifying kind of characteristics about those areas?
Not really, Paul. I mean, I think there's each of them is a little bit different. We've identified around 25,000 individuals really where we'd really like to get them over that vaccination line. That's not everybody who lives in those areas, but I think if we get those 25,000 first doses done in the next week or two, that will really give us confidence that we've protected those communities as well as the rest of the city and the state.
With the change to quarantine requirements, in the bottom of the release that's been sent out today, it talks about how we will be looking at that again come 80%.
Yep.
Can you just give us some context around what that would mean? Are we looking to reduce it further, or who would be considered a close contact? Could potentially change, that sort of thing?
Yeah, look, I think as we start to look beyond 80% double dose vaccination, and as the Minister said, hopefully far higher, other things start to become possible. So we are taking a long sort of end-to-end look at our entire how do we contact trace in a fully vaccinated society where there are far greater freedoms. That's still a few weeks away, but what does that really look like? How do we support people who are still living with COVID at that point in time, and how do we deal with people who are primary close contacts, and how do we support them? There's a balance to be struck here. We obviously want to primarily protect public health and protect the individuals that are being impacted by COVID. And today, whilst we're excited about what's going to happen on Thursday, we have 850 people in hospital today living with dealing with the consequences of a very serious illness. So we want to get that balance right into the future, but this is all around finding a more manageable solution, and also finding a way whereby we give greater support to individuals to support themselves in both dealing with their condition but also dealing with any risk of exposure going forward.
I know it's hard to keep it general, but say if in a pub, if someone comes in who's a positive case, are we classifying, say, the person who serves them their meal a close contact anymore, or is it? I know it is case by case, but just trying to understand for businesses what they're in for when it reopens. So
we've been working very closely with businesses already over the last few weeks and months around the appropriate definitions of Tier 1, Tier 2. We've discussed that at these sessions a number of times, and we're taking a far closer look now around, well, if people are fully vaccinated and if they're wearing masks, if they're being asked to wear masks in certain situations, what's the length of their transaction, their interchange, and are there alternative things that we can do? We've done some really interesting work with the supermarkets whereby We're just not seeing significant numbers of workplace transmission taking place because they put outstanding principles around good ventilation, good workforce arrangements, good distancing, vaccinating, making sure their staff are vaccinated, and of course keeping their distance and wearing masks. All those things are making a difference, and that's allowed us in the case of supermarkets to really reduce down those quarantine periods for primary close contacts and to reduce the number of primary close contacts. We've done the same thing with schools for VCE students. Again, in the event that we see positive cases taking the VCE exams, and that's the sheer force of numbers means that's very likely, there will be a far smaller numbers of primary close contacts identified if the schools have implemented those procedures properly. So we'll build on that work going forward. That it's not our intention to be in a world where, as you say, people go into the pub. If those pubs are well ventilated, if they're well managed, that every person in the pub is positive because one positive case has walked in for 15 minutes.
Would you recommend then to businesses, should they keep teams split? We've seen that obviously in the past, that you have two different lots. Is that still the best way to go now?
Absolutely. So I think it's really important as all of us adjust to this new reality, and I absolutely fully recognise that for businesses this is a daunting moment as you move towards Thursday and start to reopen again after all these months. It's a really important process. But also, please maintain those really important COVID-safe principles. Maintain the segregation or the bubbling of your workplaces, your workforces, so that you can manage the impact, because there will be positive cases in circulation. We have 22,500 positive cases in circulation right now that we know about in Victoria. It is exceptionally likely that come Thursday there will still be 22,000 people with COVID in the state. There will be exposures in our shops and our hospo and in all of our other settings, and it'll be down to how effective those control systems are as to minimise the impact on other people around them at that point in time.
Do you expect there'll be big enforcement operations on Thursday, Friday, Saturday at hospo venues?
Yeah, look, there already are, Paul. I mean, we did. I think the other day, I think Friday, 500 or so enforcement operations across businesses. That of course will start to focus more around hospo and retail as those start to open up. So there'll be significant enforcement efforts by a whole range of state enforcement agencies to support businesses in coming to terms with these new measures. That's not about being punitive, it's not about catching people out, but it is about saying, can we please, as we step into the exciting weeks ahead, make sure we do it in a safe way as possible so that we don't see another big spike of cases coming forward and more people ending up in hospital, just to the point where we all want to be focusing on Christmas.
Can you clarify for kids between 12 and 16 who can get a jab at the 12 and 15, let's say, who can get a jab at the moment, do they need to be double vaxxed to go and get their hair cut, to go to the zoo, that sort of thing, or are they able to do so if they're parents?
There will be some requirements on, depending on what the settings are, and I don't have the full list in front of me at the moment, but there's certainly for children 12 to 15 will be caught up by some of these vaccination requirements as well. That will be. It'll depend on whether the child is accompanying the adult, and again, I think as we announced yesterday, there are some common sense adjustments around that. But look, we're seeing 12 to 15-year-olds, 3/4 already first dose vaccinated. I think around a third are already fully vaccinated. Those numbers will continue to rise, and certainly by the time I think the whole state gets to 80% double dose vaccinated, 12 to 15-year-olds will be very close behind.
Aaron, just on those isolation changes, what does it mean more broadly for kids that can't be vaccinated yet, that become close contacts at childcare? And how does that fit in with their family who may already be fully vaccinated? Yeah, look, that's a real challenge. And look, obviously we're really keen to get the advice from ATAGI and the Commonwealth authorities around what we do with younger children. And I'm sure many parents will have similar desire to get some clarity on that space. At this point in time, children under the age of 12 who can't be vaccinated will still be tied up with that 14-day quarantine period. We'll be very keen to find a way through that. Obviously, if there's a way for ATAGI and TGA to confirm that they can be vaccinated, to enable them to join all of us in that vaccination ranks as soon as possible. Do their parents need to stay in isolation?
Look, I think there'll be duty of care issues for those parents. So depending on the nature of the exposure, whether the child's been exposed out of the home and they're being supported as a primary close contacts, then there'll be sensible arrangements for the parents to manage that.
Sorry, could I ask a question of the Minister?
Of course. Anything else for me?
Just a quick question. Sorry, just on Geelong, there's been another jump in cases there. I think their ref number is now at 2. How concerned are you about the outbreak there?
Oh, look, I mean, we're concerned about any cases we see in any settings, but I think the Barwon Health team have got a really effective contact tracing approach. They've got a very good grip on the active cases in their community. I think the majority of those cases we've seen are linked. And look, I'm not a public health or an epidemiologist specialist, but I think the ref rate in those very small case numbers does bounce around a bit. So I don't think my colleagues would take that too literally. We have a known and understood set of clusters. We are seeing some regular new cases coming in. At this point in time, our sense is that's pretty much under control. And look, as Geelong is highly vaccinated. It's got good second dose numbers. and this will be challenges all of us will face over the weeks ahead. You know, we are moving to a world where lockdowns will not be something that we can just reimpose to give everybody breathing space. It'll become increasingly around how do we chase down those positive cases, how do we isolate them effectively, but also for the rest of us to make sure we're vaccinated and protected. Blake?
The vaccine passports, checking in and stuff. What are your teams telling businesses on how best to approach those situations where someone might not have the vaccine passport?
Look, I think this is all around common sense and you know the right balance between customer service and doing the right thing. And you know, I grew up working in my parents' shop, and you know, 9 times out of 10 everything's wonderful. 1 time out of 10 you have to deal with difficult situations in any retail and hospo setting. And this potentially, I appreciate, is yet another, you know, one of those difficult moments whereby there'll be a small minority of people who don't want to play. But again, today 2/3 of adult Victorians are fully vaccinated, so they're not a problem. By the time we get to Thursday, it'll be 70%. By the time we get a few weeks off down the road, it'll be 80% plus. So I don't think these are going to be large numbers of transactions or issues that people are going to have to deal with. And I think hopefully most people who operate a customer-facing environment have some reasonable guidelines in place around how they deal with, you know, difficult customers and people who want to do things that they'd rather not have happen. And I'd encourage them to be ready for that. They can, of course, let us know. They can let the police know. They can let local councils know if they need an extra bit of support. And to Paul's question from earlier, there are and there will be hundreds of people out there, whether they be from VicPol, whether they be from other enforcement agencies, who are there to support that reopening exercise. And I think this will be a sheer force of numbers. I think the vast majority of us want to get on with this. The vast majority of us are fed up with being stuck in the place we've been at in terms of, you know, the COVID pandemic. And if the price for doing that is to show that you've been vaccinated, that seems a pretty small price to pay. Anything else from me? Minister.
Thank you. Projections show that we are due to hit 90% double vax around November 9. That would give us one of the highest vax rates in the world. At that point, do you still anticipate there will be limits on home visits, density requirements and masks?
Look, I think we can be very, very proud that we are now enjoying speculation about being on the cusp of becoming one of the most densely vaccinated places on the planet. What an extraordinary achievement by scientists, by all of the people administering vaccines, by the logistics people making it happen, and by everybody just turning up with their arm. Amazing. The national roadmap sets out the points to 80% double dose vaccinated, and you know, it has been our government's position and our roadmap reflects this, that is entirely consistent with that agreed national plan. And so what 85% looks like, what 90% looks like, goodness, imagine 95%. What a striking thing that would be. Every additional shot in an arm gives the public health people that advise us more to work with. We've seen that in this acceleration and the additional freedoms that we've got coming our way on Friday. But I think that it's probably unhelpful to speculate. That's really a matter for further discussions at National Cabinet. As always, we will be guided by the public health advice. But yeah, you bet it's a race, and it's really, you know, I feel really hopeful and excited about what reopening is going to mean for a whole lot of our small businesses, for all of the people who work in those organisations, and indeed for people who just have desperately missed their loved ones. And so, you know, like let's not tap out at 80%. Let's just take this as high as we possibly can. What a wonderful thing that would be. And it'll give the health people more options, and it'll give our businesses more options. And that will, of course, be incredibly important for job creation, economic recovery.
Minister, over the last couple of days, we've spent a lot of time speaking to business owners along Lygon Street. Mm-hmm. You know, similar sort of areas of Melbourne, they've got great historic and sort of heritage significance. Businesses are closing down all over the place. Will there be any further support to these areas that are really essentially Melbourne and you know, the essence of our city?
Yeah, so there's been very significant support, a $100 million package and then a $200 million package, if I recall correctly, a partnership between the state government and the City of Melbourne to respond to those areas, in particular in our inner city areas that have been so profoundly impacted. The Minister for Industry Recovery and myself are regularly talking with our industry leaders and business organisations who on behalf of their members are advocating where extra effort might be needed to support economic recovery. I think there's some areas of our business community that will bounce back into action very quickly. There are others that might need some more support. But as has been the case, each and every day through this really, really challenging period, we will work to give everyone their every best chance of successful recovery and future success. We have had great numbers of new businesses open during this period, and that's an extraordinary credit to the entrepreneurial spirit. It's just wonderful to see. There's always change, and actually the data suggests, a bit different to the observations that people will make in their neighbourhoods and in particular parts of Melbourne and Victoria, but the data suggests the number of people closing businesses is actually lower than usual. Now, I suspect that's because there are a lot of people waiting to see what reopening looks like and feels like for them before making a permanent decision. So I think we have probably quite a lot of businesses that are in a hibernation state and they'll make their own assessment about what's next for them and what's best for them. But Business Victoria have got some wonderful resources for people wanting to start new businesses and for people who might be finding that their business has come, to the end of its life, and what support can be there for them to transition into what's next for them. Of course, a lot of our business owners and operators have multiple businesses running at once or indeed over their working lifetime, and we want to make sure that those people are in the best possible shape they can to do what they do best.
Last question.
Can I just ask you one?
Oh, sorry, just really quickly. Is the plan for Mildura to exit lockdown on Thursday along with the rest of the state, or is the current plan for them to do another full 7 days?
Mildura? Yep, I'll get Jeroen to answer that one. That's right.
So look, Mildura's numbers today are encouraging, nine positive cases. At this point in time, we'll keep reviewing it day by day. If we can bring them back in again on or out of lockdown on Thursday night, then that will be a great thing to do. But let's see how it pans out over the days ahead.
Sorry, just one more for the Minister. Apologies.
Oh, you're going to upset Steph.
I know, sorry, Steph.
Yeah.
I know this has all happened while you've been speaking, Minister, but it's incumbent on us to ask, as you're the representative for the government today. At today's IBAC hearing, Rick Garotti, who's the Banyul Mayor, has said in a statement that he assumed Nazir Al-Azmar, who's the President of the Legislative Council, had been covering the costs of members in that branch. So he was alleging that Nazir was involved in a branch sacking operation run by Hussein Harako and Adam Somyurek. Given that Luke Donnellan had to step out of the ministry for a similar allegation, do you expect that Mr Al-Azmar might have to address these allegations?
What you're putting to me is something I've not heard previously. I've been with you all talking about small business reopening and recovery the last hour. I'm not going to be making comments on the hearings that IBAC are undertaking. I think it's appropriate that they're able to run their course, and so I won't be making any comment on that.